Good afternoon and welcome to my studio. I'm very honored today to have Fiofori in our presence, for many reasons. For the last 8 weeks, we've been graced with the wonderful memories and artistic captions of his views of pictorial 70s and 80s Nigeria. But for many years, I've had the privilege of calling him an uncle, adopted uncle, muse, friend, sparring partner, and just father. He calls me Aja, and it means a lot to me. For those of you who know what that means, there's so many symbols to that. But Uncle Tam is somebody who I feel that I don't need to say too much about. I feel that those of us who are privileged to be familiar with his work in photos and film and word and thoughts know that this is a living icon. And it is my personal joy and mission to let as many of you know what I already know. And hopefully this afternoon, in the company of two other great human beings that I respect very greatly, Emeka Kizo and Larry Shashore, a conversation will be had about the photography, the art, the stories, the history, the compulsion, the inspiration, the man. So thank you very much for joining us. For those of you who are present, I'm really honored. Please try to maintain as much silence with your phones and your gadgets because we're recording this session. And please just enjoy what I consider a gift. And today is now my curated gift to you as well, Tam Fiofori. Thank you very much.
Okay. So as Ugoma said, it's such a pleasure. We're very grateful to have this time with Uncle Tam, to share this time with everyone. I am especially honored to be doing this with Emeka. It's always great when you're with family, and for me, this is just so much fun. This is the best way to spend a Saturday afternoon. And this has been a long time coming. We're very happy that we're able to make it. God has spared our lives these several months, and here we are. So I think we're going to have a great conversation. We're going to have it's going to be bookmarked, if you like, by several of Uncle Tam's photographs. So I'm just going to begin, and Emeka, please come in with your well-versed knowledge of everything as the hour progresses. Again, we were speaking earlier, and we were just talking about contextualizing your work, and not to be boring and academic about it, but just to say that I consider you a totem. I mean, for everybody who is watching Uncle Tam, and we have to begin to take note of this. Uncle Tam is very much a totem in the Nigerian canon, in the Nigerian photography canon, and I was thinking about it earlier and how one can quite literally draw a direct line from what we consider to be, or for whom we consider to be the very first Nigerian photographer, J.A. Green, John Adagogo Green, to yourself in the documenting, in the capture of colonial life, of public life, of civic life, of imperial majesty. I can draw a direct line from him, his photograph of Ogoramen Ogaisi after his capture, right down to yours in 1979 at the coronation of Oba Radiola. So I was just wondering, I mean, what you think of your role, photographers like yourselves, as record keeper, because it just seems like there's this compulsion to capture all the time, to collect, and for that we are grateful.
Let me start by saying a very big thank you to Ugoma for providing this platform, and also equally big thank you to Mr. Kiazo and Lanre for their support. I fully appreciate this platform because I think there's the need to rescue photography from being a poor cousin of painting, which is the impression that has been created in Nigeria. This image here is called a Casa Coronation Parade. The Casa dance is usually held anytime there is a coronation. And the beauty of it is, if you notice, they are holding, placards with images that represent historical events performed by past obas. It's like, in a spiritual way, bringing back the memories and the activities of former obas to greet and to fortify the new oba. Because like I said, it is performed only at coronations. If you look at the placards they're holding, they have images from the past, images of various obas and the spectacular events that they participated or created. And it's very interesting that this Ekasa coronation dance was invented or thought about by Queen Ebilah, the first Queen Mother. And it's interesting that Queen Ebilah, this is the ivory mask of Queen Ebilah that was supposed to have been used as the symbol of Festac, but it was looted when the British, in 1897, I think, when the British, under the pretext of a punitive expedition, raided Benin, and sacked the palace. That was the repository of bronzes and other artworks. This photograph has a lot of memories for me in terms of the creative process. I like to document rhythm. And in a sense, to freeze motion, but at the same time, freeze it in a manner that you can feel it, or you can imagine the extension of it. So this photograph, for me, I was fascinated by this group of people holding these placards, which they were twirling and dancing, and the image of the rhythm. So the challenge for me was to be able to, in a sense, capture that rhythm, and the motion. So it was like, it goes back to my principle of photography. In other words, I'm a full frame photographer. When I raise my camera and I look through the lens, I've already, in a sense, framed the photograph. So it's like, it's instinctive. I see the photograph. I already see the photograph before I take it.
Right.
And that's why, like I say, I'm a full frame photographer. I never crop my photographs. So combined with the fact that I'm a full frame photographer and I like to freeze motion, This is a classic example of those techniques I employ.
Okay, Tom, I'm going to jump in at this stage because I want to go beyond the physical, because a lot of your work, in fact, I'm concerned, your work is a continuum of an advocacy. If you pardon the expression, it's not a strict term, an advocacy that you have projected, for well over 50 years. Now, I want to go, because really this is the end point. This photograph you see here, at least at that particular point when you took it, was the end point of a movement, of a personal thrust of movement for you. But I want to understand I'm not going to ask that silly question of, when did you start taking photographs? No. But when did you begin to develop this sense of capture, of historical capture? Or should I say, the capture of cultural history? When did you develop that sense?
A lot of credit goes to my father, Fiofori, who was for his days a beneficiary of a good education. In other words, he attended government school, Bonnie, and he used to like to tell us that amongst his classmates was Daddy Onyama. And what government school Bonnie did was he gave them a kind of rounded education. They were into sports as well as the creative arts. So I remember as a kid, my dad was into photography. He was into music. He used to like to play the guitar. And I was aware of images. And then I think what encouraged me to really, as you say, get into this advocacy, using photography to tell a story or to correct certain misconceptions, was the awareness in the 60s of Marshall McLuhan's maxim that the media is the image is the message, and that we were in a kind of global village. And also, my experience in England and in America in the 60s, the image of the African, the black man, could be depressing if you didn't know any better. On television, especially in films, the black man was portrayed as someone who didn't really have any presence, any cultural dignity, as if we had just, come out of nowhere. So I felt the need for myself, and as a sense of responsibility, I felt the need to document the black man, his culture, and to make the point that there's dignity in the black man's culture, and with dignity there's creativity, there's intelligence. And that was where, I started, paying a lot of attention to documentation. And like my guru, Professor E.J. Alagwa, said, in 2009, I decided to do an exhibition which I entitled A Peep into history and culture to celebrate 30 years of a particular year, that was 1979, which I feel was a very pivotal year in terms of my photography. Interestingly enough, most of these images here come from 1979. The image, the coronation of the Oba of Benin, Eredua, was 1979. And the other images we will see, like the presidential campaign, 1979. And then Mofe Shile, the housewarming in Ijebu Igbo, also 1979. The only photograph not from 1979 is this one there from Festac 77, and I call it The Spirit of Festac. It's a photograph of the crowd at the opening ceremony of Festac in 1977.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-on before I hand over to Mary, because really it's not my turn. I'm looking at this photograph here, and this is a decoration of Omonoba. Well, he was not Omonoba then. Well, he was still Omonoba. Omonoba Nedo Uku Apollo
Apollo, yes.
Erediawa.
Yes.
Now he's honorific. Ake Enogiawe Uku Noko Wanegwao Yare. You know what it meant. You know what he was Cambridge educated, GCI educated, but then and the son of an ex-Kingsman Obakenzwa. But at the same time, he seemed to be on a mission of repair of the damage that had been done in 1897, a renaissance. And then it's quite interesting that he now gave access, because access to this is not to be taken for granted. Access to this ceremony is not something it's not thrown to you. He gave access to you. So I think that actually is an important point that we made. I'm going to just make that point and then hand over to Larry to now follow up from there.
So you've just talked about, thank you so much. You've talked about 1979 and how all of these images, it seems as if it was a culmination of something. So I want to go back a few years to the 1960s. And to my mind, you've always been at the very core of whatever was new and modern and hip. And that's frankly how I see you and your work. I know that you've done really interesting things in your career. Apart from photography, you worked in music, you worked in film as well, notably with Sun Ra, who was I think a proponent of Afrofuturism. I think we've come to understand it as improvised jazz, etc. To my mind, that was some sort of, perhaps was that the beginning of your Pan-Africanism, and I think it is the results of those types of interactions that we see today. But can you just talk a little bit about how that came to be, what you were experiencing? Because I just see a lot of your work in that way, just moving forward, thinking, opening new roads, new areas.
Very interesting. At the risk of sounding corny, I believe in vibrations.
Rhythm, vibrations.
Vibrations,
Yeah.
you know, and vibrations kind of put me and Sun Ra together, so to say. Apart from the fact that, well, I'm not an astrologist. Sun Ra's Gemini. I'm Gemini. And like he used to say, there are two types of Geminis. The underdeveloped Geminis who can be a nuisance. They're like unguided missiles. What I gained from Sun Ra was the idea of not doing the possible. Because the possible has been done. It's to aspire to do the impossible, to be futuristic. And I put that into my concept I must make this point that these photographs from various parts of Nigeria were not sponsored by anybody. I put my hand in my pocket, so to say, sponsored myself to these events. And I had this kind of calling. Now with the Benin, I grew up in Benin. My old man was a teacher at Edo College. And in those days, the tradition was, he was a civil servant. When you are posted to a new place, you go and visit the Oba. You know, talking about the 40s now. Just before I was born, my dad was posted from Owerri to Owo, and then from Owo to Benin. So he, as was the tradition then, he went to visit the Oba of Benin. That was Oba Akenzwa, to say, well, my name is so and so and so. I've just been posted to your district as an education officer. So he developed a kind of rapport with the Oba, as the Oba's children were also students at Edo College, which was like the premier secondary school in Benin. So from that, a kind of rapport developed between the Fiofori family and the Akenzwa family. And I remember as kids, we used to go visit, with the old man to visit the palace, and very fascinating. The Benin culture is so powerful, so awesome, although I'm told not to use that word, that right from youth, I was attracted to it, although there were certain aspects of it that were quite fearsome. But I suppose as a kid, you don't want to remember the scary part. You're more interested in the part that excites you, that's new. So with that kind of rapport, I just felt it was like my sense of duty when the coronation came about to be there, because I felt this link with the Bini royal family, like I said. And I remember this particular photograph. After I'd done my 2009 photograph exhibition at Didi Museum, I was invited by Omoregbe, Erediawa, the son of Oba Erediawa, to come and do present the exhibition at his place called the Hexagon. He had a kind of entertainment center. And I took the exhibition, which in other words was like 30 photographs taken 30 years ago when I was in my 30s.
Wow.
That was the 2009 exhibition. So I was invited to bring the exhibition to Hexagon. And of course, Benin being a small town, word got out that, there's this exhibition at Hexagon. And I was invited by Omonoba to bring the exhibition to the palace. And that was, in a sense, the first photo exhibition in the palace. And it was very interesting because there were two aspects of the reception. There were some traditional chiefs who came and raised an objection to the photograph and saying, "How dare you? Take those photographs and exhibit them to the world." Like they felt I had, what's the word? Desecrated the culture. And then, of course, I could be very hot-headed. And I said to one of the chiefs, "Well, oh boy, cool down now." The Oba himself has invited me. And the bit I know about Bini culture, if Oba says it's okay, I don't know who you think you are to pick the issue. And I remember vividly, the Oba came, when he saw this photograph, first thing he said to me, "You mean you were there?" Because let me give you an example. This photograph was taken close up. One of the things we are taught in photography is don't be afraid to go close up. And it was taken with a normal lens. Well, I must confess though that in those days I didn't really look Nigerian, quote unquote. I had a full beard, bushy hair, and those were the days of the analog photography. So I had 4 camera bodies, different lenses. So I didn't look like, quote unquote, a local photographer. But based on my confidence that there's another thing about photography, your equipment speaks a lot for itself. Anybody who saw me and saw my equipment knew that I was a serious-minded photographer. So the tendency to kind of mess with you is limited. So the Oba said to me, "You mean you were there?" Because I was bold enough to go close up, and I tell my students, don't be afraid. You must have that confidence. Because there's nothing as annoying, as frustrating as the photographs you missed. It's like a fisherman. He's always bugged by the fish he missed, he didn't catch. It's the same with photography. You see an image and you know you are supposed to have that image. You break all protocol to make sure you get the image. So when he said to me, "You mean you were there?" I felt very good. It was like an acknowledgement that you mean you got this photograph. Incidentally, this is his first outing after he'd been crowned. He was crowned in the midnight, and his first public outing, he's on a bridge which was specifically built over a river. Yes. Tradition has it that when in those days, the Oba of Benin was not like the Oba of the whole of Benin, so to say. There were certain parts of Benin where there were, you might say, traditional chiefs who, like, in a sense, kind of challenged the Oba to say, well, you are Oba until a specific Oba decided to build his palace in what is now the middle of Benin. So tradition has it that when he was coming to his palace, he was challenged by the Ogiame, who was like the ruler of a particular area in Benin, to say, where are you going? He says, I'm going to my palace. And who are you? I'm the Oba of Benin. What? You are the Oba of Benin, but you are a cock.
Yes.
So he had to, that was like something he had to tribute to the Ogiame. And at that junction, it was like, okay, I will let you pass to your palace, but in 7 days' time, I challenge you to a battle. So this is a very significant photograph because it's his first public outing. So when a new Oba is crowned, he comes to this place where he was challenged, where his ancestor Obas were challenged. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We have a historian here who's really hit the spot.
So can I just point out that bit of history actually came from your book? The book that you gifted me, this same book.
Yes.
Because it was very, very well detailed without going into... So that was a brief interruption just to throw the tribute back. Yes.
Interesting story about the cock, though. I wonder if it is not related to the cock that the statue,
Traditional.
Cock that's been taken away. That's in Jesus College right now,
Yeah, the cock,
in Cambridge, and it's coming back. I'm not sure, but anyway, should we do another photograph? Should we go straight into another photograph?
It's quite interesting that the Ogiamia was actually a young... I think it was a young...
Actually, when Eriadua was coronated, the Ogiame was a 13-year-old young man, and he encouraged him to take up the title. And in the book, there are photographs of the battle between the Ogiamen and the Oba, although these days it's a mock battle.
So,
Yes. Uncle Tom.
Yes.
This photograph. Now, so many layers emanate from this.
Yes.
Because, okay, fine, we look at the man at the center of the frame, almost like dead center. The framing is excellent. Let's leave that for a second.
Fantastic. Can you?
Oh.
Because I like that point. I remember at the 2009 exhibition, there was a guy from the French embassy, and he came and he made an observation which you just made. And he said he was very interested in the framing. Baba Awo to the Awo on the, on the, what do you call it now? Podium. The way they were aligned. And symmetry is also part of my, I like symmetry, when I compose a photograph. And after a while, it's like these things, maybe it's the creative process, are impulsive. In other words, by the time I raise my camera, I already know the photograph, or the photograph has already been taken. So by the time I raise my camera, because I'm talking about the days of the analog, photography, I already know what is in the frame. In other words, cameramen who are here, you look at the 4 points and you compose your image. Symmetry is very important. Apart from is it lateral, linear? You have the vertical, when you look at the frame, split it, vertically, linearly. Symmetry, like I say, is always a part of my composition. I like to place my images within the frame in a pleasing manner. And for me here, for some strange, not strange, for some, is it impulsive reason?
Yes, that works.
You could see that the symmetry of Pa'awo,
And the tower.
In the tower behind.
tower behind, yes. And now this photograph also is a commentary on the politics of those days. My ex-schoolmate, no offense meant, I attended King's College Lagos.
That's right.
The late Professor Claude Ake did mention that the campaigns for the 1959 elections?
Yeah. The 1959, December 12th.
Yes, were so well done that CBS. By the way, Claude worked at the Brookings Institute in the States. Yeah, Claude Ake.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah, and he mentioned that the campaigns for the 59 election were so excellent in terms of content and manner that CBS made a documentary on it. And this is a classic example of the politics of those days. Now here's Pa'awo, the sage. Because you look at him, he's actually reading from a 12-page manifesto. You know, that was before this sloganeering. In those days, politicians, they had a message. They had a manifesto. They had a sense of responsibility. So they needed to sell their programs to the electorate. And this is a classic example of it. Awo reading from his 12-page, manifesto. And it, in a sense, ties with the slogan. I think a man with a vision, blessed with a
Vision, the man with a mission.
mission, blessed with a vision. Yeah, so it ties in. Now, this is another aspect of photography. Like you say, many layers. We have the message, we have the sartorial commentary. In other words, the way he was dressed. So you look at the photograph and you see many layers. It gives you an idea of the sartorial, reality of those days. It also gives you an idea of the development. For those of you who might not recognize, this is the TBS, Tafawa Balewa Square.
You just mentioned sartorial commentary. How was he dressed? He's wearing a buba and shokoto.
Yes.
To the ordinary eye.
It in a sense, okay, one can translate it to mean that he was a simple man, not ostentatious. My old man used to say, sorry, I quote my old man a lot because he shaped me in many ways. My old man I discussed politics with my old man a lot as a kid, teenager. And one of the politicians he admired was Nyerere for his simplicity. I think in those days they called those Chinese suits, Yeah. What you remember those?
The Mao suits.
Mao, yes.
Didn't they become French suits?
Yes. Okay.
He also wore the French suit, which was a different one.
Okay.
The Mao suit was there.
Yeah. And Nyerere was like, very simply dressed. And you say that for Awo. Awo was not into flamboyance in terms of clothing, but he was very cerebral.
He was.
Very cerebral. That's why he was rightly called the sage.
Can I just point out something here?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I noticed the serenity, the calm, because there's a lot of energy around him. There's a lot of noise, vibration, as you say. But somehow at the center, he's almost like a metronome. He's just there, calm, measured in his delivery. You can't, you don't sense any tension. You don't sense any hysteria.
I'm going to get through my 12 pages.
I'm going to get through it and you will listen. So, but the thing is also, it's also indigenous in the manner in which you captured that. And I think that's really powerful. This is a comment, it's not really a question. Yeah.
I'm glad you made that point because I was thinking about it last night. There was a calming, aura with this generation of politicians.
There was?
Huh?
There was?
Surprisingly.
Yes, surprisingly. In other words, you approach them, and that's something else. I was just reflecting. This was 1979, I think July. Awo's last campaign for the presidential elections. I left this venue and I raced across town with 4 camera bodies hung on my, and raced across to Ikeja local airport to catch a photograph that, is part of the 1979, a photograph of Shagari with Adamu Chiroma. Shagari waiting to catch a flight to Sokoto to vote. And there was, like I say, this aura, this calmness about them. I approached Shagari and he had a lit cigarette. A copy of Daily Times on his lap. Very neat shoes. Shagari's shoes were like always top, very well polished. And he was sitting on this battered chair. The photograph is somewhere.
Yeah, it's in it.
Yes, it's on the other side of the road. But I do like the cheeky cigarette that he has lit.
Yes, and then
So we're gonna move. We're moving to the next photograph now.
Yes, could
That
we?
was not planned, but do you want that to be put up?
Yes, please. Yes, just briefly.
It's a bonus photograph.
Now, it's something to do with about your aura or your confidence as a photographer.
In other words, so you were there.
Yes, I was there. So when I arrived at this scene, if you look at this photograph, there is Shagari. People didn't know he was a chain smoker with a lit cigarette. Adamu Chiroma by him, which shows like the kind of relationship the old politicians had.
He actually stepped down for him because
Exactly.
he won the nomination.
I'm glad you made that point. There was no animosity. If we remember those days, that was the politics without bitterness. Who was that? Waziri, yeah. Now, the point I'm making is this. When I approached them, Chiroma wasn't, had a big frown on his face. It's like, I don't know, maybe he didn't want people to know that Shagari was a chain smoker. And then I looked at Shagari and he kind of smiled. It was an invitation. And I relaxed and I took the photographs. And like I say, there was Shagari now in conversation with a briefcase, battered chair. And look at people, they were so relaxed. Look at people, the back. There was this guy who, in 2 weeks' time from then, was going to be the first president of Nigeria. Looking so relaxed. 2 points I have to make here. I couldn't have survived with 4 camera bodies and lenses, moving from TBS to Ikeja. I would have been waylaid, my cameras, stolen. And with these politicians, there were no, in fact, in a sense, they invited you to photograph them. There were no thugs around to say, what are you doing here? Smash your camera. There was something genteel about them, about the politicians of those days.
At least comparative to
yeah.
those that came after.
Because I'm surprised to hear that.
Yeah,
I thought that was a particularly difficult time as well.
No, in the sense that there's a photograph from this series showing the OWL UPN supporters.
What's behind you?
Right there.
What's behind you?
Oh, yeah. Which one? Here?
This
Bottom right.
Yes. Every time he made a point, they made the V sign, OWL, acknowledging the point he's made. They were not like the violent rabble that you see around politicians.
And they probably weren't paid to be here.
They were no.
Certainly one.
They were certainly, yeah.
Well, then, I want to just touch on something before the next photograph comes, very briefly.
Yeah.
Because all of these dovetail into, I don't want to closet you because it's impossible to closet Uncle Tam. But then your place as a photojournalist, because your predecessors, and there were many before you and many before Smith McCall, but let's leave that for a second. The earlier were they were photo artists.
Mm-hmm.
They style themselves photo artists. But I would say that you were one of the very first photojournalists from this land, because your skill as a writer was comparable to your skill, or is comparable to your skill as a photographer. So I think it's an important point to make as we go on, because you could textually describe these scenes in the same way that you captured them. So I do not know if you want to just talk about that briefly before we go to the next photograph.
Yes, I give credit to the late Ken Sarawiwa, who was a friend, and he paid me the compliment by saying, "Tam, you are a pioneer photojournalist." And I think I know he understood, you might say, what my mission was, which is to complement the fact that, as they say, one photograph is worth 1,000 words or more, or tells a story. To complement it with, with text. I don't want to sound like grumpy old man. These days, the term photojournalist has been watered down to the extent that you find photographers in newspaper houses who now feel that they must be called photojournalists. And quite a few of them can't even write a caption. It goes to show how certain terms have been watered down or bastardized.
Thank you. Thank you. Well,
So now we're here at the next photograph. So we've gone. It's interesting that we Providence, I think, that
Yes.
that picture butted in, because now it's segueing quite smoothly into Shagari, the president.
Exactly.
So I take it this is inauguration again, Uncle Tam. So you were there.
No, actually,
This is a 1980 date.
Okay, this is the 1980.
This is, yeah.
yeah, yes, it's very interesting. If we look at the back, one thing about Shagari, he was an elegant dresser.
He was.
You know, I mean, you have to give it to him. Look at the majestic, Baba Rega was wearing. Actually, this was taken during the Army Week celebrations in Kaduna.
So that would be January.
Exactly. He had been inaugurated in October.
yeah, to a first.
This was his first outing as, commander-in-chief. And if we look in the background, we see Ekweme, am I right?
I can see Michael Prest.
Exactly.
Michael Prest.
Yeah, I don't.
And I think that looks like Rishishi, if I'm not wrong. Haruna.
One of them saluting, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. There was Shagari. And I think I have another photograph of Shagari. This time, that's it over there. Dressed as...
Commander-in-Chief.
exactly.
Field Marshal's uniform.
Taking the salute. So you can see that in a sense, like with Shagari now, you have him as a presidential candidate, you have him as a president and a commander-in-chief. So you can say,
Yes.
Evolution.
yeah,
Symmetry. I don't know.
the evolution.
Of the man.
Yeah.
Or the seer as well.
Yes.
The person who's also
Yeah.
documenting
Or indeed, this story.
the story.
Pages are being turned. Interesting.
I'm just going to go into something that is not on any of the ones. It's about your documentation of other artists as well. So we've talked about photojournalism, but then in your filmmaking, you've been a part of Lights Camera Africa, a film festival that we've worked together on over the last 10 years. And you've participated in it about four times now, I think, at least 4 times for sure. And each time, it's usually a film about another artist.
Yes, yes. I think as a photographer, I believe I have a sense of responsibility, sense of duty. And also, I think a measure of how good or great you are is to be able to appreciate other artists. For me, that is the first step of trying to be a good artist. Like as they say with writers, you read other books, other people's books.
Yes.
And I think it is very important. And as a sense of duty, filmmakers and photographers, we need to document the other flowers, creatives around us. It's our duty, it's our job. I don't like the idea of the Western world being experts about everything here. There was this thing about all the experts on Nigerian arts were based in the West, And one of the films I'm quite proud of is a film I made with Kachi Benson on J.A. Okai Ojekere. We made the film a few months before he died. And it's the only documentary film about J.A. Ojekere. J.A.D. Ojekere. Okai. J.D. Okai, one of the great photographers Nigeria has had. And if we don't, like I say, it's a sense of responsibility, sense of duty. If we do not appreciate and sing their praises, who will do it? Is it Oyibo? Forgive my saying that. and in fact, I was doing this. I was doing a video on my Sonra book, and I said something to the effect that Sonra was a victim of racism because white American press could not appreciate or accept the fact that a black musician who was not trained in one of their conservatories of music will come up with the idea of space music, futuristic music. And then what made it also worse was that the white music press, they're always looking for scandals. And Sonra did not provide any scandals for them. So Playboy magazine described his music like a bull in an earthquake in a Chinese,
China shop.
Yes. And you notice that when the Western press wants to write about creative people, black people, there's always this twist. There must be some scandal, and I believe that it is our duty to project our heroes in the creative field.
Okay. It just brings me to, I just want to drop a question here. The artist, let's not even present you into the photographer or whatever, the artist as a critic. Now, many might be aware that you were once an editor at Downbeat magazine, which is no mean feat, not because we need validation from them, but it's also an acknowledgement of the quality of the individual. Because I'm sure they would have, it wouldn't have been given to you just because you're a nice guy. You naturally would. But then I will then fast forward 30 years, 40 years, it was late 1960s at Lights Camera Africa. A film had just been screened. I'm not going to go into detail, but there was one major historical inaccuracy in the film, which you noted, and Uncle Tam is not known for. He will tell you what he feels, and he did, and I noted it that day. And the thing is, the young man was a little bit. I called him aside. I said, "Listen, just go and learn from this." Now I want to come back to you. It was said with. It was not said with malice. It was said with love. But Uncle Tam was upset because he was like, "Look, get your job done. Get your facts sorted." Mm-hmm. So I want to come back to you now. Because your perfectionism, that has permeated your work. I want you to speak. Just is it? I know it sometimes sounds snobbish. Like, oh, I'm a perfectionist, but it's actually part of you. Could you speak to that briefly?
Yes, very gladly, because there are three aspects responsible. One, I go back to my old man, Emmanuel Fiofori, Emmanuel Bloom. He was like a teacher, disciplinarian, and a sportsman. I learned from him how to do things properly, how to be meticulous. He was an inspector of schools. His job was to go around secondary schools in Benin province, write reports on, the level of teaching, blah, blah, blah. And I remember as a kid, he had a map, in his office. And on the map, he was able to, using various colors to show the schools he's visited. And then another bit, color schools that he had to visit. So I learned that kind of, you might say, discipline of doing things properly. Logistics. And then also playing sports. My old man was also into sports, and I got that from him. I played a lot of sports. I played cricket, athletics. And one thing I learned about, from sports, obey the rules, procedure, and then training. You just can't go out there and expect, to perform wonders if you've not trained. And you must be disciplined enough, especially in games like cricket, to obey the rules. If the umpire gives you out, you walk. That's why I see, I think to be a good, efficient, creative person, there must be that element of discipline. There must be that appreciation of rules, procedure. I must tell this story, how I became the first new music and electronic music editor for Downbeat. Downbeat was a magazine started in the 30s, and at its height, it was read in 90 different countries as the jazz Bible of the world. So I started writing for Downbeat, and 4 years after, by 1970, I had become the first new music, electronic music editor for Downbeat. I decided that my first cover story was going to be on the Moog synthesizer. Moog.
As used by Jimmy Hendrix.
Well,
Sun Ra.
well, sorry. Well, you're right. But so I picked up the phone in Downbeat, and I called Robert Moog. Robert Moog was a professor of physics.
Yeah.
Was he?
Yes, at Princeton University, Trumansburg. So I called him, I said, Mr. Moog, my name is Tam Fiofori from Downbeat. I want to come over and interview you because I'm doing a cover story on the Moog synthesizer. So he gave me directions. So I now went to Newark, New Jersey from New York, and we flew in a small plane, 14 of us, from Newark to Trumansburg. Then a slight drama unfolded. I was the only black person on the flight. That was early 1970. Every other person had been picked up, except this white guy who kept looking at me, pacing up and down. Finally, he couldn't contain it. He came to me. Are you Mr. Fiori? And I said, no, I am Mr. Fiofori. You could see he was disappointed because he was expecting an Italian. He thought it's Fiori. He didn't know I said Fiofori. So you could see they sent a black man to me. So he hid his disappointment.
Not too well.
Well, but I could sense it. So he drove me home, and his wife had prepared a sumptuous pasta dinner
For this Italian.
for the Italian. So he said, this is Mr. Fiofori. You could see she was disappointed. So we went through a first dinner. Then the next day, picked me up in the hotel to his studio. Then the first question I asked him was, how does your synthesizer deal with sound decay? Kind of shook him up. And I told him, I said, that as kids in Africa, we used to, make our own music instruments. You cut the pawpaw tree, the stalk, or the leaf, you cut it, we bore holes in it, and we put spider's web on some of the holes, and we blow it, and we get the buzzing sound. I didn't tell him all that. Then I said, how does your synthesizer deal with sound decay? Kind of blew his mind. He said, you know what? He said, you seem to be the first person to understand that I have invented a musical instrument and not just a box for sound effects. Then he gave an analogy. He said, if an elephant plays a Steinway piano, it doesn't mean that it's not a musical instrument. It's just that it's an elephant that is playing it. He said, I have a problem. I do not have a musician who understands the sound scope and can approach the synthesizer as a musical instrument. But not me now, I start to play wayo. I was Sonra's manager, living in the same commune with Sonra. So I said, can I use your phone? He said, yes. So I picked up the phone and I called Sonra in Philadelphia. I said, Sonny, I want you to come to Trumansburg tomorrow to come to... So I told Moog, I said, I have the guy who will solve your problem. Said who? I said, Sonra. He said, Son who? Never heard of him. So I picked up the phone. I said, Sonny, I want you to come to Trumansburg tomorrow. And he came, and they gave him instructions. He came to the studio, dressed in his robes, and Moog must have been saying, who the hell is this?
Another Italian.
Another Italian. And then Sonra sat, he had just made his first portable Moog. Before then, the Moog was like old, telephone exchange with patch cords. But this was, then Sonra sat on his portable Moog and played it. And when Sonra is in the mood, his fingers on the keyboard are lightning fast. Sonra played it. Incidentally, Sonra and Ray Charles were the first two musicians who recorded with an electric piano. Sonra with the Wurlitzer in 1956.
Okay.
So Sonra had always anticipated electronics. So when he played it. Moog was so flabbergasted. There and then, he gifted Sonra his first ever portable Moog, and he said, do me a favor. The first concert you perform with this instrument, do me a 7.5 inch per second recording and send to me. And interestingly enough, the first concert we did was for a black community in Brookline, Massachusetts. And we sent the recording to Moog. later on, when, as usual, the white press were writing about Sonra, some guy said, well, Sonra was listening to Western classical music, modern
really?
Western, yeah. Not Debussy, what's the other guy called?
Tchaikovsky.
Yes, listening to them. Yes, another, the French guy, modern in the 70s.
Not sure.
Jean-Michel Jarre? No, that was later on.
Yeah, huh?
Eric Satie.
No, another name. Anyway, they claim that Sonra was listening to them to be able to play the way he was playing on electronics. And I told them that I lived with Sonra in the commune 5 years. I never heard him say, listen to them, which is part of what I was saying, is that sometimes the Western music press does not give credit where it's due, when it's not one of theirs.
So,
Yeah, go.
sorry. Yeah, we're just going to go to the.
Okay, this is the,
This is the final picture.
Okay.
And you have 10 minutes.
yeah, this is a very interesting photograph. They are not dancing on a grave, if you look closely. They're actually dancing on a soak away. You know, because two people looked at it and said, oh, is that a grave they're dancing on? No. This is from a series, Mofe Shile, Housewarming, Ijebu Igbo, 1979. There was a band playing, and it's very interesting that from the documentation, you could see that the instruments they were using, the drums, were like related to the kind of drums that were used by the Benin Youth Royal Ensemble. And these ladies heard the music. They were coming, so they were coming in, they were dancing to the music. That's why I call it dance entrance. And it's very interesting. Like, we go back to the sartorial aspect. Look at what the other one is wearing. It's like an adire, is it?
Like one is damask and
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
that is like a dual.
Okay. You know, and then back to my rhythm.
Yes.
You know, capture the, you could sense their dance movements, you know, swaying, you know. So photographers, what they call moment of decision. When you decide, that's the moment. So you must look at you must sense the photograph. You must sense the rhythm. And this is a classic example of that.
Catches at its peak.
Exactly.
Other movements.
Yes, and you could see that the two of them, the other one was more expansive. This other one more,
States.
but both of them, you could sense the
I
movement.
don't know why. I'm certain that they're dancing to Sakara.
No,
I
definitely.
don't know why.
There was definitely a Sakara drum in
Okay.
the ensemble.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
I
yes.
don't know why.
Yeah, you are right. You are right. You are right because you are right because yes, we are talking about that. Let me deviate a bit. Dancers like to capture them. I remember an incident at the shrine. I remember this incident. There's this lady that came in with her boyfriend. She was quote unquote from the north. And when she got on the dance floor, it appeared as if she was dancing out of sync. Because anybody aware of Fela's live shows they had the girls in the cages doing their hip, pelvic gyrations and moving to, mostly Henry Kofi and Tony Allen. But this lady was dancing to the rhythm of the conga drummer. So it looked out of sync. But when you checked the way she was moving, like you said, she was dancing to a particular drummer in the, There's another photograph of dancers where there's this, what is it? There's a guy, a drummer, what do you call him?
You're talking
No,
the Sakara.
the Sakara.
yes,
The twin Sakara.
No, that's it. This more like Bata. But there was no Bata there. It was more Sakara because I remember that photograph.
yes,
It was Sakara, and the thing is that he was quite expressive
yes,
when he was playing.
yes. And there was this guy, is it bata dancing? Is it what they call bata dancing? A bit of that was, it was fantastic, the way he was moving to the rhythm.
Staccato.
So really,
Yes,
Staccato.
yes, exactly. Yeah. And sorry, are you
I'm in love with that.
is this your friend?
He is now.
No,
No, he is.
Doctor.
are you the KCOB?
Yes.
No wonder.
well, I think we end where we began with rhythms and vibrations.
Vibrations, exactly.
And sartorial commentary.
And sartorial
Moral
commentary,
commentary,
exactly.
yes.
But then I think we can take questions from people now. We have about 10 minutes left, so I think we can do that.
More than 10 minutes.
From
I suppose.
everybody. I'm sorry?
More than 10 minutes. No, she.
Even.
Yes, sir.
So,
Sir, do you have a biography or an autobiography?
No, and I've resisted people doing one on me.
I think you're doing the world an injustice.
So I'm told by people.
so I'm told.
He said it before.
I believe. Let my work speak for itself.
Yeah, but it's the commentary on the work that's even as interesting as the work itself. The commentary, the life that was lived, that produced the work, to me is an extremely complicated tapestry, which should not be lost.
I like that. But having said that, though, one of my, Ugoma has always brought me, does not want me to rest. One of my joys had been, especially with film, although I've not made a feature yet, but one of my dreams is to have my film showing somewhere, and I walk in there, or I'm there, and nobody knows I'm the filmmaker. But thanks to Ugoma, he says I must come out and talk. Well, I suppose I have to thank all of you for coming, and I hope you've enjoyed it.
I want to hear more.
Okay?
But there are more questions. So you are saying goodbye.
No, I'm saying
No.
this is more often.
Yes.
Some more comments, just some comments. So,
Yeah.
of course, Okutam, it's a pleasure. We thank you for allowing us to harass you.
I like that word.
Yes, and now we know that now you're trapped here, so we may not let you leave until you sign that you will do the autobiography. But I think that the work does speak for itself, and so thank you for the work. I wanted you to just talk a bit more because before we started, so your writing work. And Fela, we talked about the shrine just now. If you could just talk to us a bit about that song, that infamous song that was
Well,
to share that with us.
Well, I wrote the lyrics for "I'll Not Be Gentleman at All" for Fela.
Wow.
I knew Fela, although he was much older than, I got shipped out of the country quite early. So there was this bond those days. That was in the very early 60s. That's why I admire Wole Soyinka. I remember when we were both invited for this event at French people here, forgive me, at this place called Aix-en-Provence. Yes, south of France. There's this annual ceremony where they honor Nobel laureates. 2007, Soyinka was the guest. And myself and George Oshodi, a great photographer, were invited to do a photo exhibition. And like I say, I met Soyinka and I thanked him for his poem, The Telephone Conversation. Because I told him that it helped us a lot, because early 60s, when I went to England, racism was bad. Room for rent. No Irish, no blacks, no dogs.
Oh.
Yes, and I remember, I was a fine boy in my youth. No, serious, no joking.
No joke.
No, fine boy, no pimples. There I was, really fine boy. With my, college scarf. You know how proud you are. Going to the underground and no one will sit by me.
Yeah.
Except, some old lady who sit by me with her dog. She'll bring out a chocolate, bite, share with the dog. It was that bad, So I thanked Soyinka for that poem. Are you white? No, but the soles of my feet are white. And he told me that the poem had been adopted into the school system in England.
Yes.
Anyway, I remember Fela in those days. Fela was very, very ambitious. Put his trumpets under his, go to all the clubs and would try and jam with them. Of course, after a few notes, they would throw him off the stage. But he was very persistent. I remember he used to go to jazz clubs. The 100 on Oxford Street.
Yes.
Go there. Mm-hmm. And, so after my sojourn in the States, where I got involved in music, working with Sonra, and I came back, Fela knew, of course, we used to go to his dances in those days, because the pickup bands Fela used to have, Cola the Beatles. Anytime there was they gave a concert, we all flocked there. So when I came back, he knew, and I used to go and visit him. And Fela was a real great character. So that led up to him inviting me to his rehearsals at the Surulere nightclub on Tuesday mornings. There was this particular day, he was rehearsing, and he played he composed and he played the tune, "I'll Not Be Gentleman at All." Then he came to the table where I was sitting with Alex Oduro, one or two of our friends. My mother had just invited me and my friends to come and have lunch. My mom was very, she liked to have my friends around. And then Fela said, Tam, write write lyrics for this song. So I wrote something. He said, no, Tam, this one is too Oyibo now. Which one you there? And then at that stage, Alex Oduro asked small boy Kolobo,
Okay.
you know, the guitar, to go and buy him some rice. And I said, then I said, you see, Alex, you know, you want chop rice so that when we get to the house, you go chop some more. So you think, say, Mama, I have belly food. Mama go say you be gentleman. That fella say, hey, that's it. That's why you notice it starts with then call you. Make you come chop. You chop more. You say you belly food. You say you be gentleman. Me, I not be gentleman at all. That's how you develop the. You know.
That's excellent.
That biography has to happen.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
Excuse me, I actually have a two-part question.
please.
My first one is, I understand that in order to be a creative, you obviously have to have that structure. Like you said, your father taught you, that you have to be able to have discipline and structure to be able to become an artist. But do you also think that at some point you need to get rid of that structure to let your creativity thrive?
Fantastic question. I will quote my creative guru, Sanra. You have to know the rules to break the rules. Because when you know the rules and you break the rules, there's something, you know, extra.
License.
Yes, you're coming, you know. I remember, I go back to this. I remember taking Sonra to Europe in 1970. And Sonra was on one of his improvisational things on the electronic keyboard. And some lady came up and said, well, what's that? My little daughter can play all that. You just, you know, moving your fingers on the keyboard. Then Sonra said, yeah, you can play it, but can she write it? And that was the fantastic thing about him. He will improvise with the band. He made sure every rehearsal was recorded. Then he will sit down hours after to transcribe everything, including his solos, and then send it to the Library of Congress as copyrighted material.
That's cool.
So I agree with you. You have to know the rules to break the rules. Second question?
The second question is about budding photographers, like younger photographers trying to get somewhere. I read in some of your interviews that you don't really agree with the way that digital photography just makes anyone think that they can become a photographer. So do you think that somebody who is really trying to learn and trying to become as great as you may be, do you think that they should go back to analog and really learn about light and about like how it
You know, then he did make the point that with the digital, you can see what you are going to take before you take it. But with the delete button, let's look at these photographs we see here, especially like the Oba series, Coronation, or my film on the Pope. Yeah. You don't ask the Oba, I beg, wait. You know what I mean? Make I arrange myself. With analog photography, you have to be on your toes. You have to be ready. You know, can you imagine, say, going all the way to cover the coronation of the Oba of Benin? Such a great ceremony. And you are shooting away for 2 weeks. You don't know what you have shot until you come back to Lagos to process the film. So you must be, you must be on your toes. You must know you must train yourself to the extent that you look at the light and you know what exposure to get. That is the key. That is the training and the skill that you acquire from analog photography, which you can now transfer to digital photography. But to completely depend on digital photography.
So what's the handicap?
Yes, and then let me make this point. When I think the ES2, Ashai Pentax,
Is that a camera?
That's a camera.
that's a camera.
Yeah, that's
Those of us that do not
stunned silence. So that's a camera.
When they came up with their self-focusing camera, ES2, we had to realize that it was programmed for white skin. So you have to learn about light and exposure. So those skills prepare you better. Does that answer your question? Or does that help?
It does, thank you.
Okay.
Any more questions? Comments? Additions?
I'm here.
Just about. Did somebody have a question?
Sorry.
Go for it.
This is not exactly a question, sir. Well, in reference to the last point you made, regards our question, there was something you said earlier where you said the moment you raise your camera, you've taken the image already, even before you click it. I think that's one of the great advantages of the analog cameras, because you literally have to picture the image in your head before you take it, or like digital cameras where it's like you take some test shots and you're like, okay, this is fine. So I think that's one great advantage of the analog camera.
So that means you're going to be shooting with an analog.
Well, you definitely intend to eventually.
I think you have to see a photograph before you shoot it. But then this is loaded. Because once you see the photograph, there's a split second between seeing the photograph and taking the photograph. And that split second, if you miss that moment of decision, you lose the photograph. Let me give you an analogy. I honed my skills photographing sports. And if you imagine a long jumper, the best moment to get a long jumper is at their highest elevation.
Big one shot.
Yes, sir. Highest elevation. Now, in the days of the analog, if you see them at the highest elevation and you hear the click, some people wrongly think that the click means that you've taken the photograph. No, the click means that the shutter is closed. That, so you've lost it. So you have to anticipate when they will get to that highest elevation and take the photograph and click. Because by the time you click, that means the shutter is closed.
You made a comment when you started speaking about how photography is perhaps characterized now as a lower form of art compared to, for instance, painting.
Yeah, poor cousin, yeah.
Poor cousin. Why do you think that has happened? And is it in some sense related to the ubiquity of digital photography. What do you think that's about?
When photography came along, the first people that opposed it were painters, artists. They felt that photography was coming to replace them, and for some reason, there was this belief in our art scene that photography can't be as great or as creative as a painting. Then you have these annoying comments made by art students. Oh, we did photography when I was studying art, you know what I mean? And then there's this other side, downside, where with a photograph, you can print thousands of copies, but with a painting, there's only one. So it's a perception. And I think we are here to correct that perception, that photography is a poor cousin of painting.
I have one last question.
Yes, sir.
How did you choose photography? Or maybe how did photography choose? What led to that?
I thought I had touched on it. The idea to make images that were meaningful and in a sense to correct some wrong images, perceptions. So I felt that there was a need to, the 60s were very, very important times for the world, especially for black people. Because that was when, reluctantly, there was this feeling worldwide whether to accept the black man as a full member of the human race. And we saw it happen in sports, politics. So I felt that, making images was a way of trying to, repair that wrong perception, and also coming further down, it's like photography and filmmaking has helped in educating Nigerians, or educating ourselves, so to say. Because you'll be amazed, we don't seem to know much about our neighbors. So that was that, to communicate and bridge the gap, so to say.